Imagine standing on the bank of a small river in what is now the Ukrainian plains. It is autumn 1362. Before you stretches a Mongol army, the descendants of the warriors who once made all of Europe tremble, veterans of centuries of conquest and terror. Behind you stands a Lithuanian force, a people whom many Europeans still dismiss as savage pagans. In a few hours, a battle will erupt here, one that will decisively reshape the balance of power in Eastern Europe for the next 6 centuries. This is not Kulikovo, celebrated in Russian legend, nor is it Grunwald, where the Teutonic Knights suffered a crushing defeat. This is the Battle of Blue Waters, a conflict almost erased in the pages of history, yet perhaps even more consequential than those famous clashes. Why has such a pivotal battle faded into obscurity? And what truly unfolded along the banks of the Senuca River that autumn day? Before answering, consider this. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop a comment below. I'm genuinely curious to see how this story reaches across the globe. To understand why Blue Waters mattered so profoundly, we must rewind roughly a century. In 1240, Badu Khan's Mongol forces swept across Eastern Europe like a devastating storm. But their conquest was not mere destruction. It laid the foundation for one of the most sophisticated empires of the medieval world. The Golden Horde, or Ulig Ulus, as the Mongols called it, the Great State. This was not just a military machine, but a highly organized administrative empire. From its capital at Sarai, on the banks of the Volga River, the Golden Horde controlled a territory stretching from Siberia to the western edges of Hungary. The system was elegant in its simplicity. The Rus princes, rulers of the territories that would become modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, were required to travel to Sarai to receive a jarl, a certificate granting them the right to govern. They paid annual tribute, supplied soldiers when called upon, and obeyed Mongol authority, or else faced a devastating visit from Mongol armies wielding fire and sword. Yet the Mongols rarely imposed direct rule. Local princes retained their lands, followed local laws, and practiced their religions freely. The Golden Horde's primary concern was extracting tribute and maintaining power, pragmatic imperialism at its most efficient. This system endured for more than a century. Under Khan Uzbek, ruling 1312 to 1341, the Horde reached its peak. Trade routes connecting the Black Sea to China's Yuan dynasty flourished. Cities like Sarai became hubs of commerce and culture, and religious tolerance, within limits, allowed Islam, Christianity, and local faiths to coexist. But empires dependent on strong leadership are fragile. When powerful rulers die, the cracks begin to appear. In 1359, Khan Berdi Beg was murdered by one of his ambitious rivals, plunging the Golden Horde into a period historians call the Great Troubles. Over the next 20 years, more than 25 claimants vied for power, each lasting only a few months or, at most, a couple of years. The once unified empire fractured into separate districts, each ruled by a warlord claiming allegiance to a different puppet Khan. By 1362, the year of Blue Waters, the Horde was divided among 3 main centers of power: Keldebey in Sarai, Bulat Tamir in Volga, Bulgaria, and Abdullah in Crimea. Behind the scenes, Mamai, a general unable to claim the throne himself, pulled the strings through puppet Khans from his Crimean base. This was the environment facing the Rus principalities. Princes no longer knew whom to obey or where to pay tribute. Sarai or Crimea, pay the wrong Khan, and a Mongol army might appear to punish you. Economic collapse, worsened by the Black Death of the 1340s and 1350s, further weakened the Horde. Trade slowed, population shrank, and revenue from taxes and tribute dwindled. Psychologically, the aura of Mongol invincibility began to crack. For a century, the Rus had feared a Horde as an unstoppable power. Now they saw infighting, assassinations, and chaos. If the Mongols could not maintain order among themselves, how could they enforce obedience over the Rus? Seizing the moment was Algirdas, Grand Duke of Lithuania. Born around 1296, he was one of 7 sons of Grand Duke Gediminas, the founder of what would become one of Europe's largest states in the 14th century. Algirdas was exceptional not merely because of his lineage, but because of his strategic vision. When Gediminas died in 1341, Algirdas and his brother Kęstutis did something extraordinary. They shared power. Kęstutis managed the Western Front, constantly threatened by the Teutonic Knights, while Algirdas focused on the Eastern territories, eyeing the rich but weakened Rus principalities. This was a remarkably effective division of labor, based on mutual trust rather than rivalry, and it freed Algirdas to pursue expansion with focus and precision. Algirdas' ambition went beyond territorial gain. He envisioned a multiracial, multi-religious state where pagan, Orthodox Christian, and even Muslim communities could coexist, provided they submitted to his authority. He understood that the Golden Horde's weakness was not simply political. It was structural and psychological. Their fractured leadership and internal power struggles made them vulnerable to a well-coordinated and determined adversary. Algirdas recognized a rare historical opportunity, a chance to secure Lithuanian dominance over Eastern Europe, seize rich lands, and claim a legacy far beyond what most medieval rulers dared to dream. The Lithuanians could coexist peacefully with the Orthodox Rus, where power was based not on oppression, but on mutual interest. This might sound idealistic, but Algirdas' actual policies prove it. He married Orthodox princesses twice, solidifying political alliances and demonstrating respect for local customs. He appointed Rus princes as viceroys in conquered territories, allowing them to govern according to their own laws and traditions. In Vilnius, the pagan capital of Lithuania, he built Orthodox churches, acknowledging and integrating the religious practices of his new subjects. He even made Ruthenian, the ancestor of modern Ukrainian and Belarusian, one of the official languages of the Grand Duchy. This wasn't the standard imperialism of the era, where rulers crushed local customs. Algirdas' approach was pragmatic, inclusive, and strategic, ensuring loyalty through cooperation rather than fear. By around 1360, Algirdas was ready for his boldest move yet, a direct assault on Golden Horde territory. First, he seized Chernihiv and Bryansk in 1357 to 1358, northern Rus lands that still paid tribute to the Horde. These were calculated probes, testing the Horde reaction and demonstrating Lithuanian strength. The response? Almost none. The Khans were too busy warring among themselves to respond effectively. Emboldened, Algirdas pressed further east, capturing the fortress of Korov near the Dnieper River, deep within Tatar-controlled territory. These were not raids for plunder alone. They were tests of both enemy resolve and his army's capabilities. Around 1360, Algirdas made a symbolic and highly provocative move. He deposed Theodore, the last prince of Kiev recognized by the Golden Horde, and installed his own son Vladimir in his place. Kiev, once the mother of Rus cities and devastated by the Mongols in 1240, now fell under Lithuanian control. But technically, Kiev remained a vassal of the Golden Horde, supposed to pay tribute. By installing his son without permission, Algirdas directly challenged the Horde's authority, a clear message that Lithuanian power was rising in Eastern Europe. The Golden Horde, despite internal chaos, could not ignore this affront. 3 regional lords, representing the interests of Abdullah, one of the competing Khans, gathered their forces in Podolia, a southwestern border region, and thus the stage was set for the Battle of Blue Waters. Sources vary on the exact year. Some say 1362, others 1363, but the events were the same. Algirdas led his army across the Dnieper River toward Podolia. This was not a hasty raid, but a calculated campaign. He brought not only Lithuanian soldiers, but also Ruthenian units from conquered territories like Smolensk, Bryansk, and Kiev. These forces demonstrated his point. This was not an invasion of foreign lands, but a liberation of territories long under foreign domination. The Lithuanian army of 1362 was remarkable for several reasons. Unlike European heavy knights, Lithuanian nobles could not afford expensive armor or war horses. Their strength lay in light cavalry, highly mobile and capable of fighting both mounted and on foot. Decades of conflict with the Teutonic Knights had honed their tactical abilities. They knew how to use terrain to their advantage, how to feign retreats to lure enemies into traps, and how to combine cavalry and infantry effectively. Crucially, they had unity under a single command, a significant advantage over fragmented and politically divided Golden Horde forces. The two armies met near Torovitia, a small town on the banks of the Sanuka River. The Mongols called it Yabu, while the Rus and Lithuanians named it Blue Waters. The exact origin of the name is uncertain. Perhaps it reflected the color of the river or a now-lost geographical feature. Regardless, the name would endure in memory, a symbol of the battle that changed the course of Eastern European history. Our main source, Matyr Strakowski, a Polish-Lithuanian chronicler writing in 1582, provides a detailed account more than 2 centuries after the event. While caution is warranted given the time gap, his descriptions align with what we know of both armies' tactics. According to Strakowski, Algirdas arranged his forces into 6 groups forming a crescent, a half-circle formation. This was not the typical medieval European line formation, where knights charged head-on. Why crescent? Algirdas anticipated the Mongols' signature tactic, horse archery. When the battle began, Tatar cavalry swooped at the flanks of the Lithuanian formation, firing arrows relentlessly. For over a century, this tactic had terrorized European armies. Keep distance, strike fast, avoid close combat unless certain of overwhelming advantage. But at Blue Waters, the arrows had little effect. Strakowski notes that the Lithuanian troops withstood the onslaught. Why? Possibly because Algirdas' army carried larger shields or wore protective gear. Perhaps the crescent formation forced the Tatars to maintain a longer firing distance, reducing arrow accuracy and penetration. Another factor may have been the declining quality of Tatar forces in 1362. Elite Mongol cavalrymen had aged or perished in internal conflicts, replaced by less trained soldiers. Horses and equipment may have been inferior due to financial and logistical strain. Whatever the reason, the arrows failed to break the Lithuanian lines. Seizing the moment, Algirdas gave the order to advance. Lithuanian and Ruthenian soldiers moved forward in disciplined, coordinated formation, armed with spears and swords. This was not a reckless charge, but a steady, deliberate push. The Tatar cavalry, accustomed to opponents standing still or panicking into traps, faced a new problem, a force advancing toward them with discipline, forcing them to choose between engagement or retreat. At this critical moment, the flanking units commanded by Algirdas' cousins from their dukas struck. Using crossbows, they targeted the Tatar flanks with devastating effect. The combination of disciplined frontal pressure and flanking attacks disrupted the Mongol lines. Confused, uncoordinated, and facing an enemy united under a single command, the Tatars began to falter. The Lithuanian crescent began to close like a tightening vice. The Tatars could neither outmaneuver nor outrun their opponents, and their retreat soon turned into a rout. Imagine the aftermath of the Battle of Blue Waters. The Tatars, shattered, fled in disarray. They had faced a coordinated attack from both front and flanks, a combination of disciplined Lithuanian infantry and cavalry, supported by Ruthenian units and crossbowmen. The crossbow, a weapon that Europe had specifically developed to counter Mongol cavalry, proved decisive. Unlike traditional bows, it had longer range, greater penetrating power, and required minimal training to use effectively. As the Tatar cavalry attempted to maintain their usual tactics, mobility, distance, and harassment, they were continuously struck by crossbow bolts and engaged head-on. The carefully orchestrated Lithuanian advance disrupted their formations, prevented retreat in good order, and negated their core tactical advantage, speed and maneuverability. Without reinforcements, the Tatars were isolated. In a typical Golden Horde battle, reinforcements from nearby ulas or reserve armies would have arrived by this point, reinforcing the front lines and stabilizing collapsing units. But in 1362, The horde was in a state of near anarchy. Abdullah, the Khan whom the three Podolian beys nominally served, was preoccupied with rival claimants at Sarai. Mamai, a powerful general base in Crimea, was consolidating his own position and could not intervene. The Tatar forces fighting at Blue Waters were effectively alone. The combination of tactical misfortune, strategic isolation, and numerical coordination by the Lithuanians led to complete collapse of the horde's formation. According to Strakovsky, the Tatars' retreat quickly became disorganized. Loss of command and control transformed their army into a panicked mass of fleeing soldiers, unable to regroup or reform defensive lines. In military terms, this is the most dangerous scenario for an army, the disintegration of order. Algirdas had achieved a decisive victory, but he did not stop with battlefield success. He pushed further into Podolia, the fertile land south of Kiev, extending toward the Black Sea coast and the mouth of the Dnieper River. Lithuanian chronicles describe these territories as liberated, not simply conquered. Algirdas' administration was strategic. He placed Podolia under the sons of Eudotus, those who had distinguished themselves in battle, while keeping many local Rus princes in power elsewhere. These rulers were now loyal to Lithuania, no longer the Golden Horde, and local governance continued according to traditional laws and customs. Most importantly, Algirdas ended the long-standing payment of tribute to the Horde. For over a century, Rus principalities had sent carts laden with silver, furs, honey, and slaves annually to Sarai. This tribute symbolized submission and enforced Mongol control. By ending it, Algirdas effectively struck a blow to both the Horde's authority and psychological dominance. Remarkably, the Golden Horde did not retaliate. Its leaders were consumed by civil war, competing for throne and managing internal disputes. Abdullah focused on internal challenges, while Mamai was consolidating Crimea. There was neither the political will nor the resources to punish Lithuania. Algirdas had chosen his moment with precision, striking decisively when the horde was weakest. The consequences of Blue Waters extended far beyond territorial gains. First, the battle shattered the myth of Mongol invincibility. For over a century, European powers had regarded the horde as unbeatable in open-field battles. While Mongol campaigns in Poland and Hungary in 1241 had caused devastation, those victories were temporary or politically motivated withdrawals. Blue Waters demonstrated that a disciplined army, united under competent leadership, could defeat Mongols in a decisive engagement. News of the battle spread across Eastern Europe, inspiring Rus princes in Moscow and Ryazan. Dmitry Donskoy, who would defeat Mamai Kulikovo in 1380, was likely directly influenced by Algirdas' success 18 years prior. Second, the battle altered the balance of power in Eastern Europe. Lithuania, previously a peripheral pagan kingdom struggling against the Teutonic Knights and paying cautious tribute to the Horde, emerged as a major regional power. By 1362, its territory stretched from the Baltic nearly to the Black Sea, and from Poland's borders to within 50 miles of Moscow. Lithuania now represented a counterweight to the rising Principality of Moscow. For centuries, the competition between Lithuania and Moscow would shape the trajectory of Eastern European politics, delaying Moscow's eventual dominance and the consolidation of what would become Russia. Third, Blue Water set a precedent for a unique model of governance. Algirdas' state was not a simple national empire, but a multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious polity. Pagans, Orthodox Christians, Catholics, and even Muslim Tatars coexisted under the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Over the next 2 centuries, this model would expand with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a polity known for its relative tolerance, incorporation of noble rights, religious freedom, and early forms of constitutional governance. While not perfect, it provided an alternative path to the centralizing absolutism and religious intolerance emerging elsewhere in Europe. Yet, despite its monumental significance, Blue Waters nearly vanished from historical memory. Contemporary accounts are scarce, and many Western European historians either ignored the battle or misattributed events to later conflicts. The limited documentation that exists suggests the battle's importance was recognized locally, but the chronicler's distance in time and place meant the story faded from the broader European historical consciousness. In many ways, Blue Waters remains a hidden pivot point in medieval history, a demonstration of strategic timing, unity, innovation, and the enduring consequences of seizing opportunity when an empire falters. Russ and Russian chronicles mention the Battle of Blue Waters only briefly. Mongol sources are almost entirely silent. The most detailed surviving account is the tale of Podolia, a story incorporated into the Lithuanian chronicles, written roughly 70 years after the battle during a period when Lithuania was fighting Poland for control of Podolia. Because of this, some historians have questioned the battle's scale and significance. Was it really a single, decisive engagement, or merely a series of small skirmishes that chroniclers later exaggerated into a major battle? Modern scholarship, however, generally agrees that something significant occurred near the Senuka River in the autumn of 1362 or 1363. The evidence lies not in the texts themselves, but in the consequences. After the battle, the sovereignty of a vast territory suddenly shifted. Tribute payments to the Golden Horde ended abruptly. Lithuanian fortifications and castles were constructed throughout Podolia, establishing a permanent presence. The scale of administrative and military change indicates that this was no minor conflict. But why, then, has it been forgotten? Political circumstances played a major role. When Lithuania merged with Poland in 1569, Polish authorities had reasons to downplay Lithuanian military achievements, justifying Polish dominance in the Union. Later, when the Russian Empire annexed Lithuania in the late 18th century, Russian historians emphasized Kulikovo, a Russian victory, while marginalizing Blue Waters, a Lithuanian success. During the Soviet period, the story became even more complicated. Lithuania was part of the USSR, and highlighting a distinctly Lithuanian historical triumph could have encouraged nationalist sentiment. Only after Lithuania regained independence in 1990 did historians begin seriously examining the battle. Conferences in Ukraine in 1997, 1998, and 2012 revisited the sources, and in 2022, the National Bank of Belarus issued a commemorative coin honoring Grand Duke Algirdas. History, in this sense, is being restored rather than rewritten. So what can we learn from a battle fought more than 660 years ago? Lesson 1. Timing is everything. Algirdas did not attack the Golden Horde when it was strongest. He waited, observed, and prepared. Then, when the horde was weakest, he struck decisively. In life, careers, and even small personal endeavors, knowing when to act can be as important as knowing how to act. Lesson 2. Unity beats division. The Golden Horde in 1362 had more warriors than Lithuania, more resources, and a longer military tradition. Yet they were divided, fighting each other as much as their enemies. Lithuania, smaller but united under clear command, leveraged its cohesion to achieve victory. Lesson 3. Nothing is invincible. For over a century, the Horde seemed unassailable. But all empires, all systems, all powers have weaknesses. Leaders must recognize vulnerabilities. Challengers must exploit them. Timing, intelligence, and insight matter as much as brute strength. Lesson 4. Victory is more than territory. It is vision. Algirdas did not merely seize land from the Golden Horde. He created an alternative model for governance, emphasizing tolerance, local autonomy, and cooperation rather than oppression. This approach, imperfect though it was, endured for centuries and shaped the development of Eastern European political culture. For over 400 years, it served as a proof of concept that multi-ethnic, multi-religious states could function effectively without coercion and forced assimilation. Finally, Lesson 5. History is not destiny. Had the three Podolian bays won at Blue Waters in 1362, Eastern Europe's trajectory could have been radically different. Lithuania might never have become a major power. Moscow might have unified the Rus lands a century earlier. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a political and cultural experiment with lasting influence, may never have emerged. One day, one battle, decisions made by a handful of individuals, all shaped the future of an entire continent. On that autumn day in 1362, on the banks of a small river in what is now Ukraine, two armies face each other. On one side stood the Golden Horde, an empire that for more than a century had struck terror across Eurasia, ruling from China to Hungary. On the other stood Lithuania and its allies, a coalition representing hope, that the small could still challenge the mighty, that unity could defeat division, that human action could shape history rather than merely react to it. As the sun set over the Sanuka River, the Golden Horde, one seemingly invincible, suffered a defeat that irreversibly weakened its power and prestige. They never fully recovered. Within 2 decades, the Horde would fragment further, and within a century, it would cease to exist as a coherent entity. Lithuania, once a small pagan kingdom struggling to survive between the Teutonic Knights and the Golden Horde, emerged as one of Europe's great powers. Its territory extended from the Baltic to the Black Sea and brought together pagans, Orthodox Christians, Catholics, and Muslims under a single administration. Algirda's approach to governance, integrating local leaders, respecting religious diversity, and ending tribute payments, set the stage for the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a multi-ethnic and relatively tolerant political entity that would shape European history for centuries. All of this was made possible because one man, Algirdas, dared to act when others hesitated. He combined timing, strategy, and purpose, understanding that decisive action at the right moment could reshape the world. The lesson of Blue Waters is not that violence solves problems, far from it, but that individual choices, even in seemingly small or localized contexts, can have consequences that echo for centuries. On the banks of a little-known river in Eastern Europe, history turned, demonstrating that nothing is fixed, nothing inevitable, and tomorrow does not have to repeat yesterday. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. What historical event do you think has been unfairly forgotten? In the next video, we will explore what happened after Blue Waters, how Algirdas and Lithuania continued to expand, confronted Moscow, and eventually formed a world-changing alliance with Poland, a tale of diplomacy, betrayal, and power as gripping as any epic movie. Thanks for watching.